Welcome. Today we have a great mastermind for you today. I hope everybody had a great weekend, had a chance to show some respect to our D-Day veterans last week. It's great. People that changed the world in one day, right? 24 hours, turned our world around. But we're going to be talking to an expert that I think is going to be great. It's going to be something you can add to your streams of income that you make, your streams of cash flow you have as a realtor. As we all know, multiple streams of cash flow. And before we get started here, I want to tell you a little bit about our group, Grow Global. So we're a big group of realtors that come from all different brokerages, all different backgrounds, all different parts of the country. But we bring on experts each week on this Mastermind Money to talk to you. Today we're going to be talking with Jonathan. I'll tell you about him in a second. But we have a Facebook group for you. That Facebook group you can join. It's called Grow Global Mastermind Academy. And somebody can invite you to that. Whoever invited you on this call can invite you, and you can get in on that. As we know, as realtors, sometimes it's very busy, especially on Mondays. Maybe noon Eastern Standard Time doesn't work for you sometimes. Just, we record everything. Here's our call last week, the ultimate buyer consultation. My wife, Stacy, and I have been doing real estate since 1997. And I tell you what, we learned something great on that call that we implemented immediately into our business. You'll want to go back and take a look at that if you haven't, especially with all the changes coming with NAR. You're going to want to see that. We have an Instagram page too. In fact, we'll put all these links in the chat for you where you can get those and you can subscribe to all of our channels. But here on our website, we talk about the events we're going to be having. We've got different coaching opportunities, healthcare, affiliate partners you can check into. And if you're an expert realtor and you're like, man, I've got something really good I would love to teach to the group, you can suggest a topic here. Or maybe you're an agent that want to see a topic. You can suggest a topic there, and maybe we'll get some experts or some panels on here to talk about it. But today, we've got Jonathan on here today, Jonathan Klunk. And Jonathan's out of Louisville, Kentucky, and he does short-term rentals. If you don't know what short-term rentals are, he's going to explain it to you today. He's been doing it for over 10 years. So we consider him the resident expert in it. And it's going to be a great way, I think, for everybody on here to add some additional streams of revenue for you. So he's going to unveil insider strategies to turn your real estate ventures into lucrative short-term rental successes. So that's going to be great. We're excited to have him on here today. And again, we are recording it, so it will be on there. Now, Jonathan, I asked him, he says he likes to take questions as we go. So if you have a question, you can type in the chat box and we'll get your question answered, or you can raise your hand with the little hand device on there and we'll call on you. You can ask it verbally if you want to do that. With Jonathan, I'm going to let you take it from there, man. We're excited to add some extra streams of revenue to us.
Yes, absolutely. And short-term rentals can very well be that way to do it. I appreciate the introduction. And before I forget, I do have a podcast. It's called The Real Estate Mentor. And season 1 is all about short-term rentals. We kicked it off with that, talking about a host of topics. So if you're interested, you can go there, Real Estate Mentor, for more information from season 1. And actually, some of what I'm going to be sharing today, I was inspired from my last podcast guest. That episode isn't out yet, but he too is in the short-term rental space, very active. And he likes to target up-and-coming markets in different states. And so we really dug into that, and I'm going to be able to bring some information that he shared with me to the group today. So I guess I'll start with my background. I'm born and raised in Louisville, Kentucky. And about 12 years ago is when I first got turned on to short-term rentals. We were going to be taking a trip down to Nashville, and it was actually my husband who found this site. And I was absolutely fascinated that we could look into people's houses and that we were going to be staying there. I had so many questions. Is their underwear still in the drawer? Where do we get the keys? What happens if we have a problem? But I couldn't let go of this idea that it's almost like having your own small hotel where people were looking at the pictures, they were booking, they're going to stay with you and just kind of be a local tourist there in your area. So we went down, we had great success. It was a great experience. At that time, we lived in a duplex. So we were early house hackers too. Lived on the first floor, rented out the second, and we inherited a tenant at the time. And our experience was so bad with him that I never wanted to rent the house again. I wanted to just convert it back into a single family residence, sell it, and capture the upside on that. But before we did, I had an idea. We have an event every year in Louisville called the Kentucky Derby, the first Saturday in May. And I had no idea what tourism was like in our city. I didn't know if Airbnb would be a good idea for us, but I thought, at least for the Derby, I think it would be a good idea. So we had enough furniture. We renovated the space a little bit after our tenant, furnished it, put it up on Airbnb. And the surprising thing was that before we even booked for Derby, we had the rest of the month of May full. And we were actually already booking into June. So we finally got our Derby booking, big money, Derby time. You can, for big events like that in cities, you can normally get about 3 to sometimes 10 times what your normal nightly rate is. And that's going to take up or cover a lot of your expenses and really drive revenue. So had a great success with that. And then we decided to purchase a house in another state. So we have a mountain house in Boone, North Carolina, and this was just going to be our vacation home. Airbnb made that available to us. I would not otherwise own a second vacation home if it was not for Airbnb. And similarly, we had great success in that market as well. And so we became very vocal about the success. And so people started reaching out to us to get us to help them get their properties ready for the short-term rental market, which we did. So just very consultative nature. From there, people then realized that there's a lot of complexity around operating a short-term rental. So they asked us if we could help manage that for them. So at one point, we were up to about 5 or 6 properties in a very short period of time. And so this side hustle that we inadvertently set up or kind of fell into became just enough of a distraction for us during the day where we had to make some big decisions pretty quick. Were we going to continue doing the short-term rental and grow that? Or were we going to focus on our day jobs and kind of let that go? Well, obviously, we decided to lean very heavily into short-term rentals. We grew that business over a number of years. At the height of right before the pandemic, so about March 15th, 2020, we had 70 properties under management just in the Louisville market, 7 employees, 15 cleaners. We had our in-house cleaning and linens company. And then whenever the pandemic hit, then Airbnb and VRBO started refunding about $2.5 million to all of the reservations that they wouldn't be able to fill since all the planes were grounded. And we kind of panicked a little bit, but we quickly took those short-term rental properties we had and converted them to mid-term rentals, getting people in there for several months at a time, since a lot of people were coming in from big cities to be close to family, a lot of uncertainty about the future. And that's when I pivoted more towards the real estate side. And that's really where my real estate career took off. And I left the short-term rental industry to my husband to completely manage. And we sold that company last April. And so now all I do in the short-term rental space is to help investors and people looking for second vacation residences buy and sell in all 50 states and hopefully soon globally. So since our audience is mostly real estate agents out there, you probably get asked sometimes about short-term rentals, especially from investors. And since I work in all 50 states, a lot of people come to me and ask me where they should invest. They have money, they want to get into the short-term rental space, but the world is their oyster. And that can be a very challenging conversation to navigate because tourism ebbs and flows. Some places that are hot today might not be hot tomorrow. They might become oversaturated. A lot of variables go into this. So here are a few tricks that I picked up from my recent podcast guest on how to kind of identify up and coming areas and drill down on those to see if they would make for good short-term rental investments. First and foremost is you want to start doing your research into areas that have either A, high growth, either population and or tourism, and number 2, a low cost of ownership. So it's easy to get into that market, maybe with $250,000, $300,000, as opposed to 750 up to $1 million, like in a lot of really popular areas that are booming right now. Once you kind of narrow down your audience for potential locations based on that, then we'll want to look at what people are doing in those areas when they go on vacation. So those are really quick Google searches that you can do, see if they have national parks around them, see if they have, if they're big on conventions, if they have specialty events that come a number of times per year, but see what is going on in that area, see how many tourists are coming in, and where you want to be exactly in that city to well position yourself. Next, you want to understand the laws. The laws are always the biggest downfall to a lot of agents who don't understand them inside and out, the nuances or the tricky, sticky components to that. So for example, here in Louisville, we have now a 600-foot rule. And that says that in residentially zoned properties, new short-term rentals cannot be within 600 feet of another one. Now, the city offers tools now to help us determine whether or not something is within 600 feet, but they always didn't do that. And these ordinances can change, daily sometimes. They could be having a vote come pretty soon, or there's something that's newly implemented that you might not know about. So always get on the city's websites specific to those areas, look at the zoning page, see if they offer any information about short-term rentals. If they don't, then pick up the phone and call them and get as much information as possible. And sometimes call back a second time because the people you talk to are not always knowledgeable about those intricate details of short-term rentals. But the last thing you want to do is buy or help someone buy a property that you actually cannot do short-term rentals in whatsoever. Next, we want to research Airbnb to find out what the competition is doing. So that's going to help you figure out if A, the market is oversaturated, B, what nightly rates they're earning, C, what amenities they have, and D, to see what their calendar looks like. So as you start finding properties in these areas, maybe ones that you want your property to look like, see what they're charging nightly and how full their calendar is. That's going to tell you if people are booking out into the future. Now, there is seasonality in short-term rentals, so that's not always a good indicator because several months of the year might be more last-minute bookings than future bookings. But if you're seeing that a lot, that might mean that these properties aren't doing very well or not performing well, or it might be that period of seasonality. So sometimes you can reach out to hosts on Airbnb and just also ask them some questions about the area. And depending on who they are, they may or may not be open to talking to you about that. And Airbnb does censor that a little bit to shield their hosts from unwanted things. So, try not to do it too much. Your messages might not go through. And then, of course, last for kind of looking into different markets is to use the tool AirDNA. AirDNA can be an expensive tool because it wants you to subscribe to each market that you're interested in, but they also have a lot of free tools available, such as their rentalizer, and it's fairly accurate. I did do an episode on season 1 of my podcast where I took 20 properties that we managed. I looked at historic performance compared to what AirDNA said that property was going to do. And all but one of those properties outperformed it. And the one that did not outperform it was my property in North Carolina. And that's only because I have a much smaller house. Most of the other houses there are huge and charge higher nightly rates. So that's going to skew some of their numbers. We're still very happy with the performance, but just didn't perform as well as AirDNA said that it would. So always look for some different anomalies as well. You don't want to rely 100% on it. You definitely want to do your own legwork, footwork, but it's a really good jumping off point to start building out your pro forma.
Hey, Jonathan, I got a question for you. So,
Yes.
when someone is looking for a property management company, how do they find that? Is there a directory of those, or what's your suggestion on that?
The Google search. That's how majority of our out-of-state and even local investors have found us over the years. Most larger cities or highly touristed areas should have a lot of local presence with regards to short-term rental management. Even in Boone, where we're located, that's primarily a college town. There are a ton of cabins there. So, there's at least 4 or 5 short-term rental management companies that I know of. And if you're not able to find one in a particular area, maybe it's new to the market, then there are national companies that you can partner with, like Evolve Networks, several others out there. Some I'm not as familiar with as Evolve. Pros and cons to using those, and a lot of times they'll actually have you find your own cleaner, handyman locally, but those also will make or break your business. So definitely want to have good, strong relationships with your cleaners and your handymen if you're using a solution like that, or if you're also self-managing from a distance, which I highly recommend.
Another question I have for you. That's a great answer. I appreciate the advice on that. So if you're looking to comp out the purchase, right, for your seller, like you have an investor, right? You sold somebody a
Mhm.
home in the past and like, hey, I have some extra cash. I'd like to maybe get into the short-term investor business, right? Because we all have past clients, I think, that we can all go into and hit up with this. How do you comp it out? Do you have a specific formula you're looking for? Like this would be a good purchase because it's this price and it's earning this much income. Do you have something like that you use?
Well, if you're fortunate enough to buy an existing short-term rental that has at least 2 years of rental history, the owner should be able to make that information available to you, at least the rental numbers. Obviously, some people don't want to share their true profit and loss statements because, if you're not planning to sell, we're all pulling as much money out of there as possible to reduce our tax exposure. But you should be able to, at least from Airbnb and VRBO, see their rental history. From there, you'll want to build out a pro forma. One good tool that you can use is if you're going for a DSCR loan, how strong is that DSCR score? The stronger, the better. They want the revenue that you're bringing in to be able to cover all of your debt exposure. But then you're going to have your utilities, and that will vary by area. In Boone, we're fortunate to be on a well, so I don't have a $150 monthly water bill. The electric is cheaper there. Property taxes are cheaper there. So you want to build out that pro forma based on the individual property and area, and ultimately see what you expect that cap rate to be. Now, be generous on the expenses and be conservative on the income because every year might be a little bit different. And then I usually go one step further as well to look at the long-term rental rates and the midterm rental rates, which are just on a monthly basis, a monthly furnished property. Because worst case scenario, if that property in the future is not able to be a short-term rental, or if something happens significantly with the tourism market, you do want the ability to pivot and understand what your exposure is going to be if you're not able to operate it in the capacity that you wanted to when you purchased it. But at the end of the day, I try not to purchase for more than the actual value of the property is worth. Although a lot of areas try and inflate that, especially if short-term rentals are hard to come by or they have sought-after tokens or special places, that can inflate the value of the property. The appraisers aren't taking this into consideration, so that means it might appraise lower. And if you don't have the ability to adjust that price or they have backup offers, your client's going to have to come out of pocket more cash and essentially pay more than the house is worth. So you better hope that rental revenue is strong.
Do you calculate it, Jonathan, as if the income coming in is covering the debt service? Do you count that as a good deal, or are you looking for a certain percentage above of cash flow? What's your ideal thing you're looking for? Obviously, the most cash flow you can get, but what are you looking
Mhm.
for?
So DSCRs are good estimators, especially for long-term rental properties, with the score being the
Jonathan,
higher the better.
what's DSCR? What is that?
Debt service ratio coverage.
Yep. Okay.
It's a loan product that is actually excellent for investors. It's a private loan. It'll often come with a little bit higher interest rate because it does have higher risk, but it only takes the property as collateral for this. So oftentimes you don't even have to provide historic banks or bank statements, yes, just to show you have enough cash to make the purchase, but you don't have to provide your W-2s, your 1099s. You can easily put it into an LLC. A lot of pros to going DSCR, especially if maybe you're overextended with the banks and they're going to be looking at your credit report to see what your debt to income ratio is. This only takes into consideration the property to make sure it qualifies. and then the rental revenue that is expected to make sure that it's going to cover the mortgage, the interest, and the taxes. So I start there, but keep in mind that with short-term rentals, you have more expenses. The cleaning fee is usually covered by the guest, so that's not something that you have to consider. The repairs that you make might have to be a little bit more because you want to keep these properties in tip-top condition. If you're fortunate enough to purchase a turnkey short-term rental, it's already going to be furnished, but if it's not, then that means that you have the upfront cost of all of the furnishings as well, which can, be, depending on the size of the house, upwards of $25,000 to $30,000 if you want to do it nicely.
Is there a
But I would say,
directory besides MLS, Jonathan, where people find these turnkey Airbnbs? Like if we have people that have cash, is there a directory for it, or are most of them found on MLS?
a lot of them can be found on MLS. If you're ever listing a short-term rental property, I highly encourage you to put Airbnb or short-term rental in the description because a lot of MLSs are searchable by those terms. You'd be surprised how many people don't. Aside from that, MLSs can be difficult because we can't even put zoning in there. Because in Louisville, commercially zoned properties, and in most locations, commercially zoned properties are usually suitable for short-term rentals, even if there are strong laws or ordinances in those areas. Aside from that, there are Facebook groups that are dedicated to listing short-term rental properties for sale. And there are a lot of newsletters out there that you can subscribe to. One is the Daily Deal Sheet, where they go out and they find the most unique properties across the country and they list those. Sometimes they will have turnkey short-term rentals. Other times I've seen them list properties that I know would not qualify for short-term rental. So that's where you have to know the local laws and regulations for these areas or quickly be able to find them because they don't do the due diligence on that portion, just the property itself.
Do you
And they'll
recommend,
actually run the
Jonathan,
numbers for you.
yeah, that's awesome. Do you recommend somebody who's going to be a first timer do one in their city, or one outside their city where maybe there's more tourist attraction to it?
Inside of your city, if at all possible, is always so much easier, especially when you're getting started. If your cleaner doesn't show up, you can run over there and clean it yourself, or you can clean it yourself all the time and take that cleaning revenue as additional revenue. You can go over there yourself if your guests have any issues, if that pesky electronic lock wants the battery to die and the lockbox won't open, or a number of things can happen when guests are there. So for me, it brings a lot of peace of mind and ease in operation if you are able to get one within your local area, or at least 20 to 30 miles from your house. Yes.
Awesome stuff. Awesome stuff. So we're speaking with Jonathan Klunk out of Louisville. He's got over 70, you said, right? Not 17, 70, Jonathan?
At the height of the pandemic, we were managing 70 short-term rental properties in Louisville. Yes.
Or
We were the
short-term rentals
fourth
are what we
largest.
call Airbnbs, VRBOs. If anybody has a question for Jonathan, you can raise your hand as we're going along here as he's talking. If he stimulates an idea that come up in your head, and you can ask that, or you can type it down in the chat. We've got one from Jacob Bell out of Boston, or Boston, as we say. Jacob, isn't that right? He says, could you expand on self-manage from a distance? That sounds tough. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that I highly recommend doing if at all possible. And you're right, there's a lot of trust that you have to put primarily in your cleaner to show up, to clean the property, make sure it looks nice, tell you if anything's broken or anything's going on that needs attention, and also to do the linens. The linens are by far the hardest part of short-term rentals. And just a sidebar on that part, that's why we don't allow one-night stays. Not only because that's typically what attracts the local people who seem to cause the most trouble out of anybody, but even, for destination tourist spots, 3-night minimums are really good to start with and shoot for as well if you can do that, because that's going to mean less turnover in your linens, so less washing. We manage our property in Boone, North Carolina from a distance, and we've had a great relationship with our cleaner for about 3 years, 3 to 4 years now. She is exceptional. I mean, we wish we could duplicate her and have her clean all of our Louisville properties when we were still in our management business. But she takes care of so much there. We do have a handyman that we can call that we have a relationship with as well. And it's also a place that we wanted to visit. So we go there 2 to 3 times a year. And while we're there, we'll update some of the furniture. We'll update the glassware, the dining situation, and just kind of check on things, make sure the air filters are being changed. So it is good to also find a place where you would want to visit, because then you can go and check it out for yourself. So if there are lakes, within 2 hours of where you live, 2 hours is a great distance to be able to still get away from your city, disconnect to where you can't just drive back if something happens, and get as much use out of it as possible for your friends and family as well.
That's great. We got a question from Tony Williams. He says, you may have presented already, but how does insurance from Airbnb work for damages by tenants? So Airbnb has
Mm.
insurance. I didn't even know that. Wow.
Airbnb is self-insured. I've heard nightmare stories about that. I've never had too much of an issue myself. That is a policy where they're always changing that. So what they do for one person, they might not do for the next person, because there is that human element of it as well. You're always assigned to a different case manager whenever you have an issue. Um, I always recommend trying to work it out with the guest first. If it's a mirror, if it's a bed, a bed is $600. Try and work it out with the guest first and see what you can do there. If you're not able to resolve it with the guest, and a lot of times, remember, you're going to be reviewing them as well. They don't necessarily want a bad review. So a lot of guests will tell you when something is broken and when they did that, and try and resolve it through Venmo or, something like that. But if you cannot come to a resolution with the guest, you can escalate that to Airbnb, and they will work with you to find a resolution. Not always the resolution you want, but people are very rarely denied. In addition to that, you also want to look for your own short-term rental insurance, because this is going to be a lot better than your local insurance provider. Sure, you can roll the dice and go with, a property or a product like Openly or whoever you have your homeowner's insurance with, because it's going to be a lower rate. And then, you run a few risks, like if you have a guest that hurts himself there, or if the insurance company finds out it's operating as a short-term rental and they weren't aware, then they might deny any claims that you have that arise from a situation. But a lot of your insurance providers out there are going to have short-term rental riders that they can add on to your policy, like State Farm, I believe. So check with them first and see what they can do. But if none of those options suit you, then there are companies like CBIZ. That's who I used most recently for the property that I last owned. What I like about them is they give you business interruption insurance. So if you have lost revenue because something happens to your property, they will look at your historic revenue, see what you normally earn during that period of time, and they will pay you that money while your property is not able to be used or under repair. We had an issue happen, and it was a historic house, so the plaster ceiling completely collapsed in the living room, all over the furniture. It was a mess to handle. They not only took care of every single expense, including dry cleaning costs, but we were paid about $6,000 over a month and a half while we got it back up and running. So highly recommend them. And I think that premium was maybe like $2,400 a year. So well worth the extra money if something should happen. But like with all insurances, we're paying, hoping it doesn't, but knowing that it could anytime.
And Jonathan, we got a request to repeat the insurance company's name. What was that again?
CBIZ.
C, B as in Bravo or D as in dog?
C is in cat, B is in boy, I is in igloo, Z is in zebra.
There we go.
I think I have all
CBIZ.
those initials right. But yeah, if you just Google short-term rental insurance companies, that's probably going to be one of the ones that'll pop up. I've used Proper as well in the past, just like it sounds, PROPER. I switched to CBIZ because it was a bigger savings on the total insurance cost, because it was also a historic house. Proper would only insure me based on the cost to rebuild the property. So to the standards, the cost to rebuild was more than the value of the property, which drove up the insurance. CBIZ would only, would allow us to only do replacement cost, I think.
Got it. Sounds great. Patricia Joseph wants to know, is it better to find a property in a major tourist market, or are submarkets good as well?
Submarkets are good as well. Major tourist markets can be difficult to get into, and very often the price of the real estate could be inflated. We're seeing a lot of that in South Florida right now. We're seeing a lot of that in the Smoky Mountains. People who went in and purchased during the pandemic to get in on short-term rentals. There's a saturation right now, a shift in tourism needs and uses. So you definitely want a healthy mix of tourism and potentially local people who could use these properties, because especially in slow seasons, like for us, it is in Louisville, November through February. Those are our slow months. So oftentimes we will try to get travel nurses in to stay with us. This is excellent for people who are relocating for work and haven't been able to find a property to purchase, maybe because you have a very hot real estate market. So, you want to not always rely on tourism 100%, but find other uses within those areas. And as you're looking for the property type that you want to purchase and you're looking at saturation, remember it's not only the market that might possibly be saturated, but the individual unit types. So you have your studios, your 1 bedroom, your 2 bedroom, all the way up to 5 and 6 bedroom. There could be opportunities even within a saturated market for different property types. And AirDNA and Airbnb can both help you to kind of look and see what that market has and what might be in need more supply.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So Nick and Monica said, wow, good to know. They appreciate the advice on that. And Christy Horton says she needed that insurance 2 weeks ago with damage from a tornado to her short-term
Oh,
rentals. So
oh, wow.
you never know when Mother Nature is going to come in and also take some money out of your pocket, it sounds like.
Yeah.
So we're
And
speaking with
also, I
Jonathan
don't
Klunk.
know.
Go ahead, Jonathan.
I was just going to say, I don't know how the short-term rental insurance companies are doing in markets like California, Florida, areas where a lot of insurance companies are leaving. So it very well could be difficult to get that short-term rental insurance in some of those markets since it's specialty.
Since we're on the subject of insurance, I think it's good to point out what you said earlier, is that if you get a traditional insurance plan and you don't have it set up and also your mortgage company, I mean, what's the chance of being able to have your mortgage note called due, right? If you get it as owner occupied and then start short-term renting it, that could be a problem too, couldn't it, Jonathan?
Yes, you definitely don't want to go the FHA route unless you're going to be owner occupied, at least in the beginning. I don't remember all of the ins and outs. I've had somebody on my podcast before talking about that, but I believe at least for 6 months it has to be owner occupied. In some states, they will ask you questions at closing if you're going to be occupying that. So definitely want to understand from a mortgage perspective by speaking with somebody who's knowledgeable in this space, what the requirements will be, what you may or may not have to disclose. Because obviously vacation properties, they have vacation loans starting, around sometimes 10 or 15%. 15 is usually most common. They might have individual requirements about occupancy for that. It's always safe to go the commercial route whenever possible and just put 20% down. But obviously, we all want to be as liquid as possible. And if you're starting to scale a business like this, if you're not able to use other people's monies or put together an LLP or partnership, then obviously you're going to be limited with your purchases. And sometimes it can be better to make 2 smaller purchases instead of 1 large purchase. I'm a big fan of number of doors over size of properties when it comes to short-term rentals.
I love it. So Kim, the boss, Kim says 2 years in some states. She says that can be.
Hmm.
Christy Goodwin had a question for you. What's a good site for MTR? MTR. Do you know what that means? I don't.
I guess that would be like the monthly rentals, what we call like the mid MTR midterm rental. Okay, I've never actually
Midterm rental.
never heard it
Midterm rental. Okay.
abbreviated.
Got it. MTR. Now I got it. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah.
What's a good site for that?
Furnish Finder is one that we've used with really good success. It's probably one of the only ones that we use. Airbnb and VRBO, you can still advertise 30+ day rentals on there. And we've surprisingly had good success, even with the fees that these companies charge for stays like that. And even if your city doesn't allow properties to be on Airbnb, because it doesn't qualify as a short-term rental, many of them will still allow them to have that 30+ day designation on there. So Airbnb, VRBO, both good for the midterm rentals. Furnish Finder is good. Some people have had success with sites like Craigslist. Keep in mind that if you're going to go off outside of Airbnb and VRBO, they have rental policies or rental contracts in place that the tenants sign before they come in. So if you're going to move away from that platform, be sure that you have a good, pretty airtight legal document for them to sign before they take possession of the property. And also know like the tenant squatter rights as well, because even though they don't have a full-term lease in place, in many instances, those are still going to apply as well if they start receiving mail. They're typically longer than 2 weeks. So make sure that you're getting your money up front, you're staying on top of that, because at some point you're going to have to evict them, and that's going to be more challenging than with your short-term rental guests who are usually there, 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks.
Love it, love it. So we've got all these realtors on here, Jonathan, and they're loving what you're saying. And they're like, okay, I like it. I like the plan. I want to find some clients that I want to sell some short-term rentals to. Where should they go find those type of buyers?
Well, first and foremost, I would start with any local short-term rental management companies that you might have in your area. They are going to have clients that want to sell, as well as people who are looking to buy. When we were running our company, we had people all the time reach out to us who were looking to get into the Louisville market who didn't have a property in mind yet. So definitely make connections with those companies. Obviously your mortgage providers, your insurance companies, if people are looking out to get pre-approved or just asking questions about insurance, they could have good leads for you as well, asking if they have a realtor they're working with, and if not, to recommend you. The biggest thing is going to be PR. If you can find a way with your local news stations, with your local newspapers to kind of start presenting yourself as a short-term rental expert. In Louisville, they always do stories about renting your house for the Kentucky Derby. And we always get at least 6 calls a year from different local news organizations wanting us to comment on that. I had somebody at an open house yesterday for a house that I'm selling that is not a short-term rental that read the article that I had written about how to rent your house for Derby about 3 years ago. I have no idea how she remembered. I'm a little afraid of that memory, to be honest. But yes, so get out in front of the media as much as possible. If you have a blog, if you have a podcast, do articles on this so that you can be searchable. Be sure to list your city name so that when people are searching it, short-term rentals Louisville, you will pop up. But most of the people that I interact with, they've found me online just from things being out there so long that they've monetized pretty well in those, for different keywords. But yeah, relationships are always key. If you go to investor events, just let them know that you specialize in short-term rentals. And of course, you can say that you're here locally, all of your laws, ordinances, make sure you do. Those average daily, nightly rates, the supply, the demand, but you can also help them in all 50 states, whether it be a vacation property or an investment short-term rental property. I use here at EXP, we have the ability to connect with agents all over the country very easily. And that was one of the main reasons that I did come here, is because I wanted to expand outside of Louisville and specialize in short-term rentals across the country. And with what we have in place, it makes it very easy to do that. But you can also look for agents in other areas through their Instagram pages, social pages, find people who are talking about short-term rentals. Maybe they've set up a blog like you, because you can also attract other agents who want to come into your market, who have a buyer who's looking for short-term rentals. And of course, in affluent circles, just say that you can specialize in helping them find vacation properties. That's always a big one as well.
Great stuff on there. John Herold has a question for you, and he says, what do you do to market your short-term rental to keep it occupied, other than putting it on VRBO and Airbnb, especially in markets where there's some saturation? Is there anything else out there for marketing?
Nothing that's easy. There are a lot of companies out there who, want to make websites for your property. But then think about it, then it has to monetize, or you have to pay for ads, and then you have to figure out what that space looks like. Um, you could have a blog, you could have a Facebook page. Facebook can be pretty good, especially for like returning guests. But I don't think that there's really anything that you can do outside of just using Airbnb and VRBO unless you're really going to be focused um, on ways to grow that and attract it. It can sometimes become a detractor to your business from a time perspective, that the ROI isn't as great just because of the amount of time it takes to get it up and going, and then the constant maintenance and then costs that come along with doing that as well.
Love that. Love that. So we're speaking with Jonathan Klunk. He's a short-term rental specialist, has over 70 properties currently that he's working with out of Louisville, Kentucky, but he's also gone national and looking to go global also. Nate Gomes has some suggestion for you here, Jonathan. He says east of Columbus, Ohio, about 20 minutes out, would be a really good place to start for your investors due to Intel. So Intel, the CHIPS Act with the government came in and started an Intel project east of Columbus, Ohio. Is going to be the largest chip manufacturer in the world by the time they're done, even bigger than NVIDIA out of Taiwan. So it's going to be big, but all the companies that are relocating here, will be a lot of short-term rentals and midterm rentals going on with these software engineers and people like that coming in. So appreciate the heads up there, Nate, on that. So we're speaking with Jonathan Klunk. If anybody has questions for him, we're talking about short-term rentals. This is a great way, guys, for you to take your current database that you have out there, and maybe you have some clients that are sitting on some cash and they don't know what to do. It's a great way to get them out there and find properties for them because, Jonathan, correct me if I'm wrong on this, short-term rentals bring in more cash monthly than a long-term rental for the same property. Would that be true in an area that's proper for it?
They do very much. And then, of course, you have different expenses than you do with having a long-term rental. So if it's a single family house, then you're responsible for the lawn. You have all the utilities, and pretty much everything else is the same, especially since the guest pays the cleaning fee. But furnishing, break fix type of things, since you're also responsible for the furniture, those are all additional expenses that come out of pocket. But generally speaking, for a well-run short-term rental, you will make more doing that than you will with long-term rental. But it's a lot more high touch as well. And that is why I like and advocate for self-management, because in some areas, management companies will take up to 30% of the gross revenue. That's a high and large, much higher than the 10% that your more traditional property managers will take for a longer term rental. So if you're able to save 30% right off the top, if you only have 1, 2, 3 properties, highly recommend self-management for as long as possible, because those numbers add up.
Beautiful. Patricia Joseph says, what is the best way for agents to connect with other agents globally to buy and sell short-term rentals?
That is a great question. I don't know that I've really explored resources for that. That might be a niche that needs to be explored, and somebody can capitalize on that. I think that, joining Facebook groups, there's probably some Facebook groups for that. I haven't, really joined any, because there's only a finite amount of things that we can do every day. I say I can do anything, but I can't do everything. So that's one area that I really haven't explored too much. I would say that you could create your own network if that's something that you're interested in doing. Find areas that you want to target, maybe do some legwork and research to find. So whenever you have that client who comes to you, you already know what you're going to recommend. So there are Facebook groups to help you find properties that are for sale. Most are active short-term rentals, and a lot of times international. That's a great place to start. You could even, if you create like a database, small database of people looking for short-term rentals, just create flyers and send these properties out to them by email until you hear back from somebody, hey, I'm interested in this property. Can you get some numbers, get some figures for me on it? That's a great way to get started. Then I've worked with the listing agent before as well, whenever you find that property that's available, just reach out to the listing agent. If you're going to take a referral commission, they could always represent both sides of the transaction. If you're not able to do business in that state, say, I'd like to bring you a buyer for your property, and you can be on both sides of the transaction. Would you pay me a 35% commission if I do that? I'll still stay engaged with my client, walk them through the process, and it'll be a win-win for both of us. That's one of the best ways and most lucrative ways to do it, in my opinion.
I love it, Jonathan. Great stuff. Jacob Belt agrees out of Boston. He says, great topic. Thank you, Jonathan. If you're ever in Boston, stop and get a lobster roll with him. Hey, there's probably some short-term opportunities in Boston. When you think, Jonathan, I mean, that's a destination city.
Depends on the rules. New York City just literally within the last year eliminated 100% of the short-term rentals in Manhattan.
So they're looking. So what's the city's benefit of doing that? They're driving people back to the hotels. Is that it for the tax money, or what is it?
Both taxes. Both hotels, because they also want to build new hotels. So in order to be able to attract new hotels to come to the area, you're going to have to create more demand, but also just housing in general. I believe, New York, they tout at least that there is a shortage within the city. Typically, the short-term rentals, properties acting as short-term rentals, a lot of people are subletting the properties. Their landlords may or may not know. A lot of people are doing arbitrage where they go in and they rent a large number of apartments, fill them with cheap furniture and rent them out. And they keep the difference of what they make and what their expenses are without owning any of the real estate. So they've outlawed those to essentially promote home ownership or make apartments available for people who are looking, and to bring in new hotel developments because they suddenly have more demand.
That's great insight on that. Yeah, so it goes back again. Make sure you check and know what's going on in your area, and also be prepared if they ever yank it. So it can't be done, right? Interesting stuff on there. Let's see. John Herold says, "What happens to the investors when they are outlawed?" When they're outlawed.
Was somebody else saying something?
Oh, John Herold said, "What happens when the investors when they're outlawed?" Oh, go ahead, Jacob.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, where we are, we have a unique thing. The three states above us, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine, are all incredible open season for this type of stuff. And they're all four seasons. People go up there to climb and be there on vacation in the summer. They got the leaf peepers right in the fall and the ski areas in the winter. And then, just people rent there. So that's I'll give a recommendation. Those three states, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine.
Jacob, did you say leaf peepers? What's a
Leaf
leaf
peepers.
peeper?
Leaf peepers. That's what we call you guys that come up to New England and look at the leaves.
The change of colors. All right, leaf peepers. There we go.
Leaf peepers.
I have a feeling that's sort of a derogatory term there. Are they taking up too much traffic? Is that what it is? They're coming in and
Just keep coming up spending money, man. We love you.
bring the money. All right, bring the money.
Bring your money.
All right, I love it.
To that point, Montana, Utah, let's see, Wyoming, places where people are going to, escape cities and build these multi-million-dollar houses. These are also becoming hotbeds for short-term rentals because they're kind of popping up overnight. They're close to national parks, doing very well. I've heard a lot of buzz about those locations. Joshua Tree was something that did very well during the pandemic. A lot of people were just racing out there to buy properties. And not only has it become saturated, but the property market has kind of bottomed out a little bit. And so some investors are trying to sell their properties. I'm reading stories about these, and they're not able to get even what they paid for the property, sometimes by big numbers. So, you really have to understand the risk that's involved in this. The bigger the city, the more volatile it will probably be with its future regulation. Nashville has been very aggressive with theirs as well. As I mentioned, commercial real estate is usually your best bet for this. Those are in any market going to be the least likely to be regulated. It's usually the residentially zoned properties that are going to be most affected. And typically, once you have a permit, you're pretty well guaranteed to be locked in for a long time, especially because a lot of states have non-conforming rights uses. So for instance, OR zoning in Louisville used to be lumped in with commercial zoning. There are little pockets of houses that are zoned OR, probably mistakenly years ago. But anybody who would go in and purchase one of those properties, you did not need a permit and you could start operating from day one. With the last iterance of the ordinance change, they moved OR into the same zoning as residential. So all of these people have been grandfathered in. As long as they keep their property registered and it doesn't lapse, meaning expired by 3 months or longer, they can still continue to do short-term rentals, and they can even pass that along once they sell the property, because Kentucky state law has very strict rules around non-conforming rights. And as long as you start doing something and keep doing it, that the city or the state cannot take that right away from you. But as soon as you abandon it, they can. I've already had one client, at least that I know of, who didn't heed my warning and had some complications happen in life. And when he went to renew, they wouldn't let him because it had expired by more than 3 months. So now he's doing midterm rentals and will probably be listing it for sale pretty soon.
Got it. Got it. So this is Jonathan Klunk. He's got a podcast that goes more into depth today. He gave us an overview today. But if you'd like to hear some more, his podcast is called Real Estate Mentor. Real Estate Mentor sounds like what it's probably on Apple, Spotify, things like that, Jonathan?
All the places.
All the places. You can check all the places. And he also gave us a great tool today. If you didn't catch it, if you go to the chat box, by the way, all these links are in here. Air DNA, like the DNA you'd have in your body, airdna.co, it looks like. Is it .com or .co?
Probably .co.
.co, perfect on there. So, oh, good, Julie, right on the spot, Julie. Thank you very much. She went ahead and put the podcast back in here again. So, look, if you have a question, we're getting close to wrapping up to the end. Now's your time. If you've been out there and been all shy, and like, I don't know if I should ask it. The answer is yes, because if you have it, somebody else probably has the same question. As we're getting towards the end, getting ready to do that, I just want to mention one more time for people that got on late. We do have a website, whygrowglobal.com. That's where we post all of our topics that we're going to be having, as well as different affiliate partners and things like that. Coaching, you can get in on it. We also have a YouTube channel where we record everything. If you heard Jonathan say something today and you missed it while you were driving, you can go back and you can watch the recording, as well as we have 51 videos on there. We've been at this for a year now. And then we also have a Facebook page that you can get on, you can get invited to, and we can put you on there, and an Instagram page also. In fact, do we know what our topic's going to be next week? Do we know who that's going to be next Monday? Somebody will come up with that, I think.
Yes, we do.
Yes, go ahead, Jonathan, or Jonathan. John? Well, you are Jonathan, probably, aren't you, John?
No, I'm just a John. I'm not as distinguished as our guest today.
All right.
But we have the one and only Stephanie Gillison, How to Sell Global Real Estate without leaving your home.
Nope.
You know, it's a great idea. I can tell everybody who's on here from doing this going on, 30 years in our real estate business, having multiple streams of cash flow is a great idea. Finding ways to take your current database that you have and find deals, right? We called it, in the old days, we called it flipping over rocks, looking for deals, right? You can take the clients that you already have and put out there to your social media and to your mass email and your mass texting and letting them know that you're starting to do some work and help people invest in short-term rentals, and see what it turns up for you. See if you can find some business in the people that already know, like, and trust you.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, put it out on your Facebook, put it out on your LinkedIn that you're going to be doing that, and see if you can find some business and ask people that know you, who do you know that's looking for short-term rentals or Airbnbs? I'm doing some studying on, I've taken some classes, and I'm ready to help some people invest in the short-term rental market. And I think it might help you find some business. And with that, Jonathan, we have 3 more messages. Let's see on the chat. Oh, we have a question. Samantha Burnett, go ahead.
Hi, Jonathan.
Hi.
Thank you for sharing.
Hello.
Hello, you definitely have my brain rocking again. We did do Airbnb before the pandemic, but we stopped because of the pandemic, and we, couldn't operate, so we haven't started back up. So now that you're saying this and I'm looking into it again, I'm starting to run across information saying that in a way or a strategy to avoid all the ordinances with the city and Airbnb is to possibly do the midterm rentals. So I just wanted to see what your thoughts were on the medium term rentals instead of short term.
Yeah, it definitely is a way. And I think that, like I said, whenever you have seasonality during low season, always great to pivot to the midterm rentals because it's going to be a little bit more consistent cash flow. Generally speaking, with the rents that you bring in, it goes long-term rental, midterm rental, and then short-term rental. So you'll have a little bit less revenue, generally speaking, coming in. Not going to say that that's the case across the board. This is generally speaking. And you still have those same expenses of having to keep up with the lawn and keep the utilities in your name. If somebody's going to stay with you and commit to maybe about 6 months, then you could talk about having them move the utilities into their name. We've had those conversations before, and everything is still furnished and provided to them. So it is a great opportunity in areas where you can't do short-term rentals. So a lot of condo developments, a lot of HOAs, and just independent cities like in Hurstbourne here in Louisville, they allow any rentals that are 30 days or longer. So all of those can be good candidates for midterm rentals. And then you'll just want to explore the area and understand who is your tenant going to be. Go on Airbnb, go on Furnish Finder, see what those monthly rental rates are, and understand how much you would have to make in order for this to be a profitable investment for you. And then you can kind of start to decide if that's a good use or not.
Beautiful. Great question on that, Samantha. Thank you for
Thank you.
asking that. If everybody would like to unmute and thank Jonathan for all his great advice today, and we all owe him a dinner once we sell an extra house for that. We got a round of applause going.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thanks,
You're
Awesome,
welcome.
Jonathan,
Thank you,
for
guys.
pouring your heart out.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Great
Great
Thank you
stuff.
for having
great
me.
stuff. And Jonathan, so you've got your podcast and you also have a management company. How would they get a hold of you if they wanted you to help? Are you just managing your own stuff or are you managing other people's stuff too?
Just managing my own right now. We sold our management company last April.
Okay.
I'm not going to lie, when you're the fourth largest hotel in the city by number of beds and you're a team of 7 people, there is a lifespan on how long you can do that and still be sane. So we were happy to sell it. Had a great run while we were doing it. But yes, just manage our own now and help people sell it. And you gave me the idea of creating a course. So maybe I'll look into that. Another stream of income for this real estate agent.
With all that you got going on up there, yeah, sell the course and you do your own little private mastermind and then network across the country. Look at that, making you money there, Jonathan. See, coming
all my
on
free time.
when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Isn't that how that works? So I love it. Thank you so much, Jonathan. Thanks everybody for jumping on. Look, we'll be on again next Monday at noon Eastern Standard Time. Bring a friend. If you're somebody who has a topic that you're like, hey, I'm really good at this thing, we'd love to hear you speak. Or if you have a topic that's burning in your head, like I need some information on this, go ahead to the webpage and suggest it there, and we'll get your topic on. Thanks again for Jonathan Klunk being on with us. We'll see all of you next Monday at noon Eastern Standard Time. Thanks, everybody, for jumping on.